Hey everybody, it is Mr. George, and today I want to do a video that looks at the history and evolution of Rome from a republic to an empire. So if you look along this timeline, top part is Greece, bottom part is Rome. So we're going to come back to this in a minute, but first I'd like to just kind of start with, as we look at the Roman world, this is kind of like in purple where it is, as far as where it is around the Mediterranean. Okay, and we see Rome is situated right here in the middle of its empire, which is in present-day Italy. Okay, so Rome as a place obviously is still a city today. So let's just kind of look at the beginning of Rome. Okay, the beginning of Rome. So when we talk about Rome, uh, there is one idea that after the Trojan War, when the Greeks won, the losers ended up fleeing and settling in Rome. Um, and then as history kind of comes full circle, we'll see that as when Rome takes over Greece, and Greece becomes a Roman province, it's almost kind of like, revenge for the Trojan War. Okay, so we have this idea that it's a city, built on top of 7 rolling hills, and really is at the midpoint of the Mediterranean. That kind of makes it instrumental as it becomes a global superpower at that time. Now, like a lot of stories that we have, the beginnings of Rome stem from 2 sons who are abandoned on the Tiber River and raised by a she-wolf, Romulus and Remus, in which at one point as they grow up, Romulus kills Remus, and therefore it kind of foreshadows that that Rome was started based on violence, and again will continue the theme of violence as it moves into a republic and into an empire. So just a little bit here, as we have the beginnings of Rome, we start to see, because of its location, interacting with lots of other peoples here, this Etruscan influence, and it starts really as just a small village. And then in 509, it kind of casts away its monarch, its king, Tarquin the Proud, and vows that it will never be ruled by a king again. So again, it actually kind of has a parallel to the United States, where they say, hey, you know what? We don't want a king. We want to kind of govern ourselves, and it establishes a republic. Now, when we talk about a republic, it's a republic where really it's limited. It's not everyone has, say, input. And as we kind of move through, you'll see that becomes a theme where more people want to have more input as democracy is expanding. So as far as the republic, we're looking at a couple of different groups of people. Primarily, the 2 different social groups are the patricians and the plebeians. Initially, the patricians are the only ones who have representation through their senate, and then what you'll see is over time there'll be a group that will represent the plebeians, and those are called the tribunes. So similar to Athens, Athenian democracy, and similar to the United States, American democracy, we start to see different branches of government. Each branch has different powers. One similarity with the United States is that Rome also has an executive branch. One difference is they have 2 individuals. Okay, one, say, in charge of the military, and one in charge of like administration. So we have 2 different individuals, and those are called consuls, versus the United States, which has 1 president. Within the legislative branch, they have different groups. Again, they have a Senate similar to our Senate, except their Senate really just represented the aristocracy, the wealthy landowning people. Okay, and then we start to see, other groups making up the legislative branch that are looking at the interests of like other people, especially as democracy expands out. And we also see that under the judicial branch, they have individuals that oversee courts, as well as their laws that are referred to as the 12 tables that were also hung in the Roman Forum for all to see, which again is a similar theme when we think about the Code of Hammurabi, Ahsoka's stone pillars. We start to see it's important for laws to be visible for people. So something about Rome that makes them impressive was their military. Okay, so their Roman military, their Roman legions. You start to see that really they see the importance and the significance of having a strong military as ways of not just protecting themselves from outsiders, but also as expanding. So really, as far as the military, it really becomes significant with their strong professional army. And now we start to see in the 4th century that Rome is starting to like conquer other people. And we also see this concept of citizenship as far as, well, if you're a citizenship, you have like certain rights as far as especially as far as like voting. So I'm just going to bounce back to the timeline here. So as far as in 509, we see a republic. We see the 12 tables in 450. We start to see Rome is expanding. Through the Punic Wars, we see Rome is fighting Carthage, a city-state in North Africa. That's where we see Hannibal on the elephants. And we see the Roman general Scipio that are fighting. As they are able to defeat the Carthaginians, we see Rome has full control over the Mediterranean. And that's important as we look at, just bounce back to our first picture, as they have control over the Mediterranean, it allows them trading. It allows them to get access to, say, grain from Egypt. And it makes it much easier to travel and manage based on not just land, but also based on sea routes. So we do start to see the decline of the Roman Republic from 133 to 127, and we really have 4 major reasons. We have a lot of internal political turmoil, where we have profits due to war, we have competitiveness, we have political control, we have the rise of popular tribunes. For example, the Gracchus brothers, where we're starting to see this gap between rich and poor, and we really start to see individuals that want to kind of like allow poorer people to have access to wealth, trade, farm, lands, as well as when another part of the internal political turmoil really resulted in granting Italian allies Roman citizenship, which not everyone agreed with. As far as the Gracchus brothers, they were both killed, which kind of shows, like, when you kind of like rise up, unfortunately, people who challenge and question at that time often had that type of outcome. So as we kind of get back to this, these civil wars, we have a lot of disorder in Rome. And this is going to lead to our first triumvirate or rule of 3 people, where we will see Julius Caesar. We see not just Caesar, but we see military leader, and we see very wealthy individual. 3 people sharing power under this triumvirate. So we have Pompey and we have Crassus. Pompey being the military leader, and Crassus being a wealthy individual. And now what's going to happen is Caesar ends up becoming, very, 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 very popular, which becomes like a threat. So another reason for this decline of the Republic is this financial burden of the Republic, which leads to unhappiness and rebellion against Rome. We also see a lot of slave revolts, where these larger estates are run by slave owners, where there's not sufficient police to enforce or control the slave population. And Rome is really becoming this imperialist capital with 600,000 people by 133 BC, where we will see approximately 60% of the population is slaves. And we see dissension within the military, where a lot of the military changes require people to be stationed outside of Italy for 16 to 20 years. Military career was very dangerous, low pay, and it really encouraged, draft dodging, which resulted in loss of pride, which is leading to private armies, generals recruiting private armies who were more loyal to the generals than they were to the actual state. So in 46 BC, we see the rise of Julius Caesar, and really as a dictator, where many of the senators believe that Caesar has the motive to become king of Rome. And as a result, he was murdered in 44 BC on the Senate floor by members of the Senate, which results in more disorder. And then we see the rise of the second triumvirate, where we have Mark Antony, we have Lepidus, and we have Octavian, who is the grandnephew of Julius Caesar, which kind of gives him a little bit of an advantage over the others, only because the people loved Julius Caesar as a leader. So as Octavian rises to the top and eliminates the other two, we see him take the name of Augustus Caesar, which again, we see lots of people being referred to as Augustus, and Caesar really kind of viewed as the epitome of a political leader. And then this leads to the rise of the empire. So as Octavian becomes emperor of Rome, we no longer, really have a democracy where people are voting and expressing their interest. And he rules for over 40 years. And as a result of that, people are happy. People think it's moving in the right direction. And as a result, basically have given up their rights. Through this time period, we see the rise of Christianity with the execution of Jesus Christ. And then we see 180 years of Roman peace through this referred to as Pax Romana. And during this time period, the empire really expands. Full court press, roads being constructed by the military, and as the empire grows and expands, we see in 285 Diocletian actually splits the empire into two, an east and a west. The impact of that is really over the next couple hundred years. The east will continue to rise, and the west will continue to slowly decline for a variety of reasons. Okay, and as we start to move towards the fall of the Western Empire in 476 AD, it wasn't just all of a sudden the empire fell apart. So as far as what's going on, we have lots of outside invasions by barbarians who are really considered non-Romans. Germanic tribes that are coming in, the Huns coming in. Romans allowed the Visigoths within the Roman territory. Economic problems, over-reliance on slave trade, crumbling from the inside. This results in financial crisis once we have these outsiders that are interrupting trade, with the Vandals claiming North Africa. Rising prices, inflation, financial crisis due to wars, overspending. We see incompetent line of emperors through death and murder. Many rule for short periods of time. Loss in civic pride, overexpansion, crumbling infrastructure, and specifically the rise of the East, where the two halves really start to drift apart. And we see Byzantium being renamed Constantinople after Constantine. The East becomes much stronger. Capitals move to Constantinople, which is really New Rome. And we see to a lesser degree the impact of Christianity that shifts divine approval from emperor to the church and the hiring of mercenaries. So I hope you found that helpful.